Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
Hi, I'm Dan Krynas, host of the Leader of Learning podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, EduMagicians, and welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and today we're going to continue our series, Teaching Internationally. And I have with me Greg Lemoine, who's going to be sharing all the tips and strategies when it comes to thinking about teaching internationally, recruiting, or attending a recruiting fair for international teaching. And I'm just really excited to have him on the show today. Greg, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to be here. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. All right, let's jump in. Greg, could you share about your teaching story? What brought you into education? And then how did you end up teaching internationally? Tell us all the details.
Well, I don't have enough time for all the details, but it started off when I went back to school. I was working for Warner Brothers at their stores. I went back into education for a degree in teaching. So at the end of my 4 years, it was about Christmas time, and I went to I'm from Wisconsin, so I went to this cocktail party, a beverage party in Wisconsin, and somebody said to me and overheard a conversation about travel and said, "Hey, you want to travel and you're going to be a teacher like in June, so why don't you go to Iowa?" And I said, "What? What are you talking about, Iowa?" No, seriously. And I don't know, Sam, when I think of Iowa, I think of like snow and I think of like nothing else there except corn. But there's a University of Northern Iowa has a job fair. They've been doing it for over 50 years. And the job fair brings teachers together, candidates that are teaching or will be teaching, and they're looking at overseas. And I never knew anything about it. So I went to this job fair and signed up for it, and they sent me a little information. I went to the job fair and ended up getting a job in Honduras. So I did that 2001. And I've been doing this overseas ever since then. So I went through all my schooling in Wisconsin and did my school of education and my pre-service teaching and all that stuff. So I got certified and went right overseas. So how's that for my elevator answer?
Can you share about the job fair that you attended? And is it still going on today?
It's probably I call them the big three. And there's one called University of Northern Iowa, like I mentioned. That's in Waterloo through the university, and they have connections with schools all over the world. And then there's also ISS, which is International School Services. I know ISS so well. I've been to 4 of theirs at least. And then there's also Search Associates. And all 3 of those big names are in the States, and they happen every year. And recently they've been doing them online and not face-to-face, but of course they're going to hopefully go back to face-to-face. That's what's so important is the connections, because sometimes you don't even have to go to a job fair. You might know somebody teaching in Korea, and you might just make a connection there and not even go to a job fair. It happens.
So when we think about teaching internationally, I'm sure some of our audience is thinking, okay, well, that's something I do at a job fair when I meet a recruiter or whatever it might be. But are there other options for students who are getting their education degree that maybe they're not graduating just yet, maybe they're graduating next year or the year after? Are there any options for them teaching internationally or getting some experience teaching internationally?
That's a great question I rarely think about. I think it's because I went jumping right in. I mean, when I interviewed, I didn't have my teaching degree. I was scheduled for, it was in January when I got hired, February. And I didn't graduate till, I think it was June. In fact, I hadn't even finished my student teaching. I had to go back and teach 3rd grade like that following Monday. And I already had a job teaching 5th grade in August. But to get to your answer, I think to your question, probably the best thing is to have an internship somewhere. And when I was teaching in Switzerland, I actually had an intern that was teaching with me in the classroom as part of her accreditation or part of her certification, she needed experience. So she worked it out to go overseas and do it. So that might be an option.
Oh, that's interesting. Looking into internships.
And I don't have information on the internship companies or the matchmakers or the headhunters that would help you with that. But if they were interested in it, I guess the thing you start with is getting to know what schools are out there and that there actually is a job out there that is possible, because people don't even know it exists. So maybe if a candidate starts looking at it in sophomore year and they know they want to be a teacher and travel, they may not go and interview at one of these job fairs or activate it, but they could certainly look online and get some information. And if I can plug one website that every international teacher basically uses, it's called the TIE Online, TIE, and it's the International Educator. It used to be, I think it was a quarterly newspaper that was out, and they do it online now. It's like $30, so even a student could afford $30 for a year just to see the information. But they introduce the different schools overseas, and they advertise, and you get to know the names and the countries and the schools.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like a great resource for somebody who's thinking about teaching overseas.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of teaching overseas?
I think the number one for me is definitely respect. I think that it's a job that people respect overseas a little bit more than we do in the States. The second follow-up is definitely your ability to travel. So where I live in a country, I sort of expand from there and travel around outside of that country and within that country and learn the culture, and maybe not the languages, but I might learn about the cultures around me and cultures that I go travel to. So those are the two biggest benefits. The third benefit is financial also, that some schools you can get away with coming back and not being in debt. If you're going overseas for a couple of years or turning it into a career, you can have options to save a lot of money. In the U.S., you don't have to pay taxes until you are over 104,000, I believe, if you're an expat, which is an expatriate, someone who lives overseas. Mm-hmm. So that is an option also. So three big things.
That's an interesting one.
Well, not every school is the same as far as you're tax exempt, definitely with all the schools, because that's just a U.S. thing. But as a teacher from the U.S., it depends on which school you're at, whether or not you're going to save money, because you have to balance your cost of living and your salary package and your everything else that goes with it, your health care and your travel. You have to really discuss that kind of stuff before you do a contract. And that's part of the interview process.
And let's jump into that. Nice segue. Just say we're going into a recruiting fair and we have international schools there and we're wanting to apply to them. What are our first steps?
Well, I can load it up by saying, first of all, when I went to my first job fair, there were no books out there or like outside information. I wrote a book about it because I wanted to read that book. So that's my first step. I would tell everybody to read it. Research is definitely your first bet. So when you sign up for a job fair, you commit to it. It's going to be some money up front. But when you do commit to it, they give you a database access and they give you a how-to, like a step-by-step, maybe a mini pamphlet of how to get through the fair. And it's not a whole lot of information. Like my book will go through step-by-step of the big three. But they give you enough information to actually understand how the flow of the job fair works, right? So you won't be blindsided. And once you get there at that job fair, it's usually about a weekend or several days in a row. And once you get to one of these big fairs, they have a panelist discussion if you go to it, which you should. And that also is like a question and answer before the fair starts. So you have some some of the experienced heads of school, superintendents, heads of school, that are up on stage answering questions for the newbies. So that's, first of all, that's learning about the job fair itself is your big step to succeed during the job fair. And I guess number one, and I said it like 5 times in my book, it's like always stay at the hotel where the job fair is being held. So
now, why is that important?
Well, and I say this in all earnesty, because if you talk to, if I was a senior in college and I said, I don't have much money. I mean, I'm a bartender at night. I go to school all day, or I don't have a whole lot of cash, $200 a night for a hotel. get the money to stay at that hotel because it's an investment in a career, or it's an investment in your next 2 years or 3 years or 4 years of your life, right? The reason you want to stay and the reason you want to stay at the hotel is because that's where all the action is. The minute you walk in that hotel, there are eyes on you. So the whole hotel would be recruiters. People have flown in from around the world to find teachers for their school. And they're in the elevator, they're in the restaurant, they're downstairs eating breakfast. So if you stay at somebody's house or stay on campus somewhere with friends like I did my first job fair, then you're disconnected from the whole thing. And if you stay at the job fair in a hotel room, you could even buddy up and find somebody to share it with and share a room. Whatever you do, you could actually go up there and take a shower. You have different districts come and do mock interviews on campus for you.
Right.
This is that's on steroids. You're doing interviews all day long. You might have 10 interviews in a day, and you are going through these different interviews. You need to stop and take a break. So go back to your hotel room and take a nap, freshen up, change your clothes, take a shower, get yourself situated. And if you're doing that out of a suitcase that you're carrying with you because you took a taxi to the hotel, it's just that much harder. And you might show that. You want to be on your A game, and part of that is no one ever told me that. I just learned that several times. It took me a while before I could commit to that. And so no one told me. I just figured that's the way to do it.
That's a great one. Staying at the hotel in which the recruiting fair is happening. That's excellent. So you mentioned we have interviews all day. What's a good way to, after we get that schedule or the information about all the schools that will be there, how do we even go about researching to find a good fit for us?
Well, there's actually going to be two ways. This one way is going to come from the schools. It's a two-way, it's like a dating game. it's like a dating game for a 2-year commitment, which is crazy to say. The schools are going to be interested in you as a candidate, and you are interested in certain schools. So some people are going to be actively hunting for you. And even if you're a brand new teacher, you have a lot to offer. There's going to be somebody out there that wants what you have to offer, whether it's your specialty or your grade level. And then you're on the other end of it is you researching them. And a lot of that comes from their databases. A lot of it comes from TIE Online. There's a guy that I just interviewed right recently. You can look for it online. It's called Pancake on a Stick. And Tony DePrado has put together a website. It's a newsletter, actually, that pushes out all of the job openings that he knows of every week. And he has links on there. And so any of these kinds of online sources, so TIE Online, like I mentioned, and the job fair itself that you choose, they have websites that they have information and databases of the schools that you can start pinpointing your research on. So if you want to go to, let's say you want to go to Zimbabwe, there's a great school in Zimbabwe. You can pinpoint that, find it in their database if they're part of that job fair, and they'll give you the link to the school. You'll find out the head of school's name, and it's all right there for you at the fair. So what's all current information, what they're looking for, the openings that they have, that they're there for the fair looking for these positions. So that's really a good starting point. But if you're there looking for a vacation spot, good luck. Everyone, I know. I just say that because a lot of people, Sam, will go to these. And I talked to a woman once. She said that she was a teacher. And I said, where are you planning on going? And she said, well, I'm a single mother, and my son wants to go to Europe and go around, and my daughter wants to go to the Bahamas. So I'm going to go stand in line for the Bahamas and see what they. And it was just a wrong way to do it. Even as a teacher that's working now, she should have been more pinpointed on the school. It's not just geography. You know, it's career stuff. For some people, for other people, it's just like they want to spend 2 years over and see what they like. And but I tell you, when I first did it, I went to Honduras. I didn't even know where it was on the map until I got done with the job fair and started looking at more information. But I was brand new to the whole game. No one ever told me how to do it.
Right. So that's why providing this resource like your book that you have, they're going to share about in a little bit here, be really helpful for somebody who's trying to navigate this on their own. They don't have to do it on their own anymore.
And that's the reason I reached out to you too, because it's the the schools overseas, I guess I could say it this way. The international school circuit is like one big school district, and all of the heads of school know each other. At least they begin to know each other as they're in longer in different years. And it's the smallest district in the world, but it's worldwide, right? So everybody talks. I know somebody that knows somebody else and somebody else. I was in Iowa at a job fair once. I came from Cambodia, and I was at the Iowa fair, and I was in the hotel. I was in the conference hall elevator, and this person hears me talking to another person because I have a loud voice. And they said, "You're working in Cambodia?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Do you know Dave? Would you say hi to Dave for me? I mean, we taught in Pakistan, their names, and we taught in Pakistan 2 years ago together." And I was like, "What? Really? In Iowa, this is happening?" So
Cool.
it's a huge roller coaster of emotions. These job fairs, and they're just, it's a packed. It's like I said before, it's like these interviews on steroids, because it's over 3 or 4 days or even 2 days, and they're making contract offers for 2 years or more. They're right then on the spot in that weekend.
So let's talk about that interview process. So
Sure.
we get called in to meet with a recruiter. We're sitting down. What should we bring to the interview? How should we prepare? What are some questions we should be thinking about and thinking about our own responses to when it comes to being interviewed for a school internationally?
Well, I guess a couple things is that you don't need to bring your whole portfolio, your big 3-ring binder and classes that you've taught and ideas and examples, especially your first interview, because the first ones might be just for half an hour, 20 minutes, like a mock interview on campus, right? Mm-hmm. They come in, they want to meet a bunch of people. They want to sort of weed through the first candidates and start targeting individuals after they meet you. So the first one that you go to, just be willing to go in there, look your best, have a CV, they call it CV over a curriculum vitae or a resume. And by the way, print your resume, but put your picture right on the resume. Right?
Oh, why do you say that?
Well, they have piles of them. So my recommendation is have a 1-page resume, maybe front and back, but 1-page resume with your current referees that you can call right then and there on there with their cell phone numbers and everything, because these guys are there for a weekend and then they're gone. So everything on there, and print your picture like through the laser printer, put it up in the top right-hand corner. And if you can even plan ahead, I did this. I put my suit on like months ahead of time and printed out the ones that I knew I was going to wear my power suit that day.
Nice.
I had that same picture with the same tie, so women could do the same dress or the same suit coat, whatever. And print it on there, because if you think about these recruiters, some of them have hundreds of pages in front of them and paper clips get stuck together. So it just makes it easier for them, and they have a picture of you right there. And here's the other thing that I noticed, and I've talked with a lot of heads of school about this, is when they go to these job fairs, they don't even look at the paper resumes as much as they look at the database, because the database that you pay for as a candidate to look at all the schools, the school pays the recruiting company for the database of candidates. So your whole resume is basically on there, including videos, including whatever work you've done. So everything is digital nowadays, and they have it. They respect having an extra copy of a resume, but they have everything in the database when you sign up.
That's good to know.
It's a lengthy process. I forgot to mention that when you commit to these things, you pay your $150 or whatever, but then you have about 3 or 4 hours worth of work if you have everything in front of you to type in all your information about graduation and all the things that you need. That first interview is about a half an hour to 20 minutes, right? The dating game. So if you make a great connection, you might get a call back, and it would be a little bit longer. So there'll be a longer interview. And I have to give you a couple warnings about international teaching interviews. Is that number one, a lot of those that are done, these roller coasters of emotion, are also weird because they're done at hotels. So when you go in, you just say, I'm not comfortable, leave the door open, and they'll respect that. But you're actually going to be in a hotel room. It's all, cleaned up ahead of time, whatever. They're using it like their office. And there might be there might be 5 people interviewing you. It doesn't matter. But that interview is going to be a little bit weird because of where it is, right? And they're used to it. You're not. But if I warn you ahead of time, then you get the idea. You'll be ready for it. And then the second warning I have is that there are no rules really as far as questions, because it's not about what kinds of questions can you be prepared for. They're looking at things like, are you going to fit in the culture that they teach in? Are they going to have to worry about you as a person and your relationships and what you have to bring to the table? So I guess to be totally upfront with them and be clear about things, because they can ask about your sexual orientation. They can ask if you're married. They can ask if you're in debt. My positivity comes from the fact that they are spending so much money on one teacher to bring them overseas and pay for the whole package of that teacher. It's a big investment. So they're going to make sure that you're the best fit, meaning trying to find people that are going to fit within their school system, because they're thinking about you living there and working there. If I interview for a school in the States, in my district down the road in Wisconsin, it's the same kind of job. It's just that I'm living in a completely different culture, and I have to rely on the school to set up my work visa and set up insurance and make sure I can, that I survive over there. They're sort of like a parent. So when you go into these interviews, it can be a little bit alarming to have questions like that. But in the long run, and looking at it from a bigger scope, I realize that they're asking questions to make sure that you are the right fit. Right.
That's really important to know, and some good information for our candidates to know when they're going into the interview process. Is there anything else we should know before we move into our last few questions for today?
So let's go to your next couple of questions.
Sure. So we talked about the importance of being prepared for that interview, what to expect in a recruiting fair. We talked about things to be thinking about when you're going into the interview with a international school. We talked about the big 3 international school recruiting fairs. Can you please share with my listeners about the work that you do and how we can learn more? If we're really interested in teaching internationally, you have a great resource for us. Let's share about that and where we can connect with you and your podcasts and all the things, Greg.
Oh, I love it. Over the last 20 years, ever since my first job fair, I wanted to write a book about not just the job fair, but about sharing information about what I do. I wrote this book in 2 parts. The first, it's called Finding the Right Fit. The first half of the book is step by step about things we've talked about tonight, or this episode, things that you need to know about a job fair, the big 3, I call them. But there are other job fairs similar. They all have the same format, at least similar format, and that should get you through it. Take it with you to the job fair, share it, buy a copy. It's on Amazon. You can search for it under my name. I can't believe my name's actually up on Amazon. It's so weird, but it's a triumph. So the second half of the book, it's all stories, because my buddy Joe, who lives in Green Bay, he's like, Greg, you've got to publish these stories. He says, if you ever watch Seinfeld, it's like the guy, he's like, I was in the jungles of Borneo. And I'm like, that's my life. I do have Borneo stories. So it just little collection of anecdotes and stories that have happened over the years, not teaching stories, but travel stories, because teaching is one thing and living overseas, and then there's the travel. And that's what really gets people going. And I didn't even include all of the diving stories. I'm a scuba diver, and I just got back from the Maldives at Christmas for 3 weeks diving, but I can't write all those down because my book's already written about living overseas, not diving overseas. So yeah, that's the gist of it right there. That's the work that I've done. I also have a podcast called the International Teacher Podcast. It's entertaining. We only have like 20 episodes, but we're also on Apple and iTunes and all that, podcasting through Anchor. I'd plug those 2 because there's only a few about international teaching. All we do is talk about stories, and we do talk a little bit about recruiting. So when Matt, my co-host, is on, we have a lot of fun talking about things that we know about and share off of each other's stories. And then when he's not online with me, I usually interview people from all over the globe. So that's the 2 plugs that I have for the book. And I can't wait for people to read it because it's not information you'll find anywhere unless you do a lot of work looking for it. And then the teacher podcast is a lot of fun. I know my mom at least listens to it. I don't have the audience you have.
Well, I think these are fantastic resources, Greg. We have the book, Finding the Right Fit, and we have the podcast, The International Teacher. And we can find the book over on Amazon and the podcast, wherever we listen to this podcast, we're going to go over and hit subscribe to yours as well. So really quick, how can my listeners get in touch with you?
I have a website called somewhere.online. So STSOMEWHERE.
I'll make sure I put that in the show notes along with links to your book and your podcast and the big 3 that you had mentioned earlier for the recruiting fairs. Greg, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
And there you have it, Edu-Magicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more Edu-Magic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the Edu-Magic within you.